The DATs have brought retail sovereign wealth funds are buying Bitcoin. U.S. government holds 212,000 Bitcoin. It's pretty crazy when you see it. So I think over the next 5 years, Bitcoin's going to 10 trillion. I think before the end of this bull market, Bitcoin will hit 250,000. That's kind of the flag I've put in the ground for the ceiling of it. And the big driver is going to be Bitcoin DeFi. The minute you can get yield and do stuff with your Bitcoin, it's kind of like I say, there's the gold mine and then there's the gold. Right now, the gold lives at the gold mine. Well, the gold doesn't have to live at the gold mine. The Bitcoin network is the gold mine. It makes gold. You can take your gold and put it in the jewelry shop, and the jewelry shop's Cardano or Ethereum or Stacks or these types of things. Well, the minute you can do that, Bitcoin gets a yield. Bitcoin gets a yield. It's a very attractive instrument because it's limited downside relative to all these other experimental things, and it has equivalent upside in many cases to other tokens.
Bitcoin isn't just heating up, it's detonating. Private money is flooding in, sovereign wealth funds are stacking sats, and the US government is sitting on over 212,000 Bitcoin. With price near $109,000, momentum feels less like a rally and more like ignition. Fast. Calls are building for a run to $250,000 before this bull ends. Here's why this run hits different. Bitcoin DeFi is finally cracking open yield for Bitcoin holders. Instead of parking coins as a pure store of value, you can now make them sweat, earning yield, posting collateral, and routing liquidity through decentralized rails. Think of the Bitcoin network as the most secure gold mine on Earth, while programmable chains, Cardano, Ethereum, and others, operate the refineries, vaults, and trading floors that put that digital gold to work. Charles Hoskinson laid it out bluntly in a recent conversation. Bitcoin's power is its simplicity, pristine monetary policy, brutal security, while complementary chains bring smart contracts, composability, and yield generation. Plug those worlds together, and you don't just get higher upside. You compress the downside versus frothier altcoins by anchoring everything to Bitcoin's Lindy Strength foundation. As regulation clarifies and institutional plumbing catches up, capital doesn't trickle. It surges. Index products, on-chain treasuries, tokenized balance sheets, Bitcoin-native credit markets. The rails are being laid for mainstream portfolios to treat Bitcoin not merely as digital gold, but as yield-bearing collateral at the heart of a new financial stack. Put it all together, and a $10 trillion market cap within 5 years stops sounding crazy and starts sounding long overdue indeed. As we bring you clips from Charles Hoskinson's interview, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
Why BTC is no longer envisioned to be peer-to-peer money rather than a store of value. We'll start there, and then we can talk more about your history and Cardano.
I mean, that's a very old school debate. I've been in the space such a long time. I remember the origins of that. It was Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin. And in the beginning, Bitcoin had to be everything. It had to be a domain name registrar. It had to be an asset ledger to issue assets on. So we had color coins and name coin. It had to be peer-to-peer money. It had to be a store of value. And the challenge is that Bitcoin, to be everything to everybody, would have to upgrade itself to something like Ethereum. It'd have to be a general purpose smart contract ledger. And that philosophical debate was discussed years ago. Really, it was the big block debate, because the very first step was expanding the space you can do things in, and then upgrading the programming languages and the accounting model to facilitate that. The big blockers lost, and what that meant was that Bitcoin basically became kind of a store of value system, which is perfectly fine because it's digital gold, and the value of gold is $10 trillion, and the value of Bitcoin is approaching $10 trillion. It'll get there in 5-10 years. So it can live in that space, but that means it has to be augmented. So the compromise was first SegWit and later on Taproot. And the idea is that you create a space on Bitcoin where Bitcoin can talk to other systems, whether it be layer 2s or layer 1s, and those other systems can backfill those things that you want Bitcoin to be, whether it be a smart contract system or some sort of data storage system or an NFT ledger or whatever the heck it is. You can do it over there. And the second part of that is allowing you to pay your transaction fees in Bitcoin and get your yield back in Bitcoin. So as long as you can do that, Bitcoin feels like it has all these capabilities, even though the base protocol is tremendously simple. That's just the way history worked out. Roger and Mike Hearn and others were on the other side of it. I straddled both sides. I actually held a lot of Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, and the space evolved in that direction, and it created space for projects like Ethereum and Cardano to kind of become very large and prominent.
What is your view on how Ethereum evolved over time? Specifically, what was your view on the merge 2022, switching from proof of work to proof of stake?
Well, it's kind of funny. We always thought that their proof of stake protocol would have been written by Elaine Shi. We were competitors with that group. So we created Ouroboros and she created Snow White. And we were neck and neck, and we watched the research that they were doing, like Fruit Chains and Sleepy and these other things. And we said, well, that's quite obviously what Ethereum is going to do for its proof of stake protocol. And we knew that Ming, who was the executive director at the time, was friends with Elaine. And so they had the relationships, they had the access, and they had first mover advantage. And so we thought that they would have adopted Snow White and hard forked somewhere around 2017, 2018 to proof of stake. They chose a very weird path. They did this whole Casper thing and kind of meandered for a bit. And eventually they got to the merge and got it done. The big challenge with the merge is that it's under the hood, kind of sort of a custodial, non-liquid system. Now they've had to do all this stuff to make it liquid, non-custodial, and they've created assets like Lido, and they have this weird slashing and bonding. But the biggest philosophical difference has always been you don't need to slash and bond to create a secure network. Cardano has been running for 8 years, 24/7. Since 2020, we've been running with proof of stake, full true Ouroboros proof of stake. We've never had an issue, and there's no bonding or slashing, and the assets are liquid. So I think this is the biggest philosophical difference, this idea that they have to go out of the way to create a lot of economic security inside the system. And that was kind of the reason why they put so much extra infrastructure into Ethereum. And they're now following that. Now, under the hood, there's a lot of great things to like. Fast finality is pretty good. They have a pretty good idea of how to make things faster. They've done some great work on the network protocol side to kind of facilitate their plans. And they've kind of kept up with things like the dank sharding upgrade and these things, because their problem is that they have a large L2 ecosystem. And so when you think about Ethereum, you're never thinking about Ethereum in isolation. You're thinking about Ethereum and Ethereum on off-chain, Ethereum on like L2s, Ethereum on other networks, and there's all these things that are happening. So you have to put a lot more thought into your network stack, to how you do pub sub, how you do event brokering, and these other things. They've been able to keep up with it. And actually, I think the design they have now is pretty sensible, and they're going all in on ZK. If you take a look at the next 5-10 years, the biggest advancements are no longer raw TPS or consensus or network upgrades. It's all zero knowledge, and they're betting heavy on hashes, and they want to get to these gigagas threshold, and the only way you're going to get there is with recursion and folding schemes, and they're betting big with ZK VMs. So that's probably a very sensible roadmap, and things like Casper become less relevant. We were talking about high performance BFT protocols and high performance consensus protocols back in like 2020, 2021, 2022, and everybody had something. Like we did Narwhal and Tusk, and we have Ouroboros Leos, and Ethereum was looking at like sharding Ether. This was the Ethereum 2 roadmap, but that all fell out of favor for ZK. And now most people are now talking about ZKs either as rollups, recursion, or folding, and that's their roadmap now.
You mentioned slash and bond. What does that mean for the audience?
So slashing and bonding basically means that if you behave badly, you have some Ether that you've locked and you lose it, or you lose access to it for a while. There's many different ways you can do these schemes, and one could be a temporary loss or a permanent loss, and it could be destroyed or it could be reallocated to other people. And basically the idea is it creates an economic incentive for you to be a nice actor. Otherwise, you have nothing at stake. So in proof of stake, you want to resolve long-range attacks and nothing at stake attacks, where if you have nothing at stake and nothing to lose, you have no incentive not to behave badly. And long-range attacks means it's quite easy to reorganize the chain. So we did a lot of work using some creative timekeeping and cryptography to show that you don't need to do that. Because the downside of bonding and slashing and staking this way is that your money gets tied up. And so the only option you have is to create some synthetic asset it's like, I can't believe it's not butter. I can't believe it's not Ether, and so you create a synthetic asset and then you trade that and you get your liquidity back. But at the end of the day, your stuff is still locked. And so if you have to lock, it's really hard to get more than 10, 20% of your supply involved in consensus, because people want liquidity. In some cases, by law, they have to have liquidity, like if they're custodial accounts or things like that. So when you have a liquid non-custodial system where you can stake without locking your stuff, then pretty much anybody can participate, which is why over 70% of the ADA supply is staked right now. But it doesn't get counted as TVL by DeFi Llama or other people because it doesn't get locked. So it's very liquid and you can move it at any time. It'd be nice if the Fed could just directly issue treasuries onto a blockchain. The minute you do that, then it solves tons of custodial problems, because then you can hold the treasuries as a reserve for the stable coins, and the stable coins could then trade. But it gets a little too close for comfort for CBDCs, but there's got to be some way with the real world asset side of the house. Because one of the things that's missing, and hopefully we can start the process of getting it in with clarity, is we have to have a conversation of how do we handle tokenized securities in general in our industry and allow them to trade like cryptocurrencies. One of the reasons why nobody wanted to be securities in the cryptocurrency space is the minute you're security, you lose all liquidity. Can't trade on Coinbase, can't trade on Binance. And so you are at a massive structural liquidity disadvantage over all the commodity elements that are trading on the exchanges. So a lot of people got deeply concerned and they said, well, we can't go down there, above and beyond the fact that compliance is impossible because you don't have, as an issuer, usually the necessary information to file a disclosure, because you just don't know what's going on in the network. You couldn't if it's truly decentralized.
The early debate around Bitcoin was whether it should be peer-to-peer digital money or a store of value. Bitcoin originally aimed to do it all: handle payments, register domains, and issue assets like color coins and Namecoin. However, to do everything well, Bitcoin would have needed to become a smart contract platform like Ethereum, upgrading its design completely. This led to the big block debate, where expanding Bitcoin's capacity was rejected, and it evolved mainly as digital gold. Regarding Ethereum's evolution, the 2022 merge replaced proof of work with proof of stake, but introduced complex features like slashing and bonding. In contrast, Cardano's proof of stake has run securely for years without locking tokens, allowing users to keep assets liquid and freely movable. Ethereum's future now focuses on zero-knowledge proofs and advanced cryptography to scale and improve privacy, shifting away from older plans like sharding. Let's watch more clips from Charles Hoskinson's conversation with David Lin.
The DATs have brought retail sovereign wealth funds are buying Bitcoin. The U.S. government holds 212,000 Bitcoin. It's pretty crazy when you see it. So I think over the next 5 years, Bitcoin is going to 10 trillion. I think before the end of this bull market, Bitcoin will hit 250,000. That's kind of the flag I've put in the ground for the ceiling of it. And the big driver is going to be Bitcoin DeFi. The minute you can get yield and do stuff with your Bitcoin, it's kind of like I say, there's the gold mine and then there's the gold. Right now, the gold lives at the gold mine. Well, the gold doesn't have to live at the gold mine. The Bitcoin network is the gold mine. It makes gold. You can take your gold and put it in the jewelry shop, and the jewelry shop's Cardano or Ethereum or Stacks or these types of things. Well, the minute you can do that, Bitcoin gets a yield. Bitcoin gets a yield. It's a very attractive instrument because it's limited downside relative to all these other experimental things, and it has equivalent upside in many cases to other tokens. So the networks that facilitate that are going to do very well because they're going to get a ton of TVL. They're going to get a ton of transaction volume. And the thing is, under the hood, it creates consumption for their tokens because people are paying those transaction fees in Bitcoin, but it inevitably has to be consumed with ADA or near or whatever. So it's like tourism. When you go to the Caribbean and you swipe your credit card, you're paying in US dollars, they get the local money, but that tourism benefits the local economy. So Bitcoin is going on tour and it's going to leave the high population, very wealthy country, and they're going to go to the Caribbean and Hawaii and all these other places, and those are different blockchains, and they'll do cool things, they'll consume cool things, and then they go back home after they're done. So once you're done getting your yield on your Bitcoin, you go back to Bitcoin and you go back to your house. So that's what's going to be the key driver of getting Bitcoin over 10 trillion, because then structured financial products can offer yields. They could be sliced and diced by Wall Street to be very safe and scored and rated. And then people just by proportion start including it like they do gold in their IRAs and their 401ks and these types of things. And so the rulemaking will let you do it. The minute that clarity is passed and all the rulemaking comes in, Bitcoin will be treated like any other financial asset from purposes of investment and taxes. And at that point, you'll see a massive flow of money into it because it's a hard asset like gold is. But remember, cryptocurrencies is going to eat AI, and cryptocurrency is going to eat medical records. And there's all these non-financial use cases that Bitcoin never will have an opinion on and never do. And so it's kind of a silly thing to say, oh, well, all these other guys will die. It's like, okay, so where am I going to go build my medical record system? And doesn't decentralization matter? I call it EPS, economic, political, and social. So I can't do any political or social things. Like, how do I build a competitor to Facebook and have a decentralized social network? I'm going to do this in Bitcoin. It's an absurd thing. So no, you're going to have other standards, and you're going to have an internet of blockchains. And I say this as an OG of OGs, and I was in it in the very early days of Bitcoin. I was the founding chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation's education committee. I mean, I understand a lot about it, and I love that community and ecosystem, and there's a lot of value they have, but they chose to be sound money. And the minute that they chose to do that and be a store of value, they have to go win. And winning means Bitcoin has to flip gold, and then it'll become the premier store of value for the entire world. Winning doesn't mean that Bitcoin's going to be a replacement for Meta or a replacement for the Google search engine or the private medical record system of the world or the largest decentralized exchange in the world. That's not what winning means. Winning means you flip gold and you are the premier digital asset to hold. And so I think the world is quite compatible with Bitcoin achieving that, but then all these other people doing these things. And oh, by the way, Bitcoin forces the blockchainification and digitalization of things and becomes an alternative banking stack. Indirectly, because everybody has to start wiring into it. And once they're into the rest of the network as well, which are far more capable and programmable. We have this adversarial nature in the blockchain space, and there's this maximalism, and all these people float around, and it's just so disheartening at times because, I'm trying to do real things. We publish 250 papers. We every day wake up, write code, and we want to solve hard problems. And if I find my network is 5% more decentralized, I'm 5% happier. If I find out I have another 1 million users, I'm 1 million users happier, not because token price goes up, but because we are getting people into a world with integrity and a world with principles and censorship resistance and transparency. So I'd like to believe that we're philosophically aligned with Bitcoin. So why should it be sum zero where if Bitcoin is to achieve great heights, that's only at the expense of our growth, especially when Bitcoin's playing a different game? Are they going to change their block time from 10 minutes to sub-second blocks? Are they going to go from proof of work to a different consensus algorithm? Are they going to allow you to write like super complex smart contracts easily and have low cost settlement and these types of things? No, they're not going to do that. And why should they if they want to be the premier storage of value for the world? Just like, does gold have to wake up and pretend it's silver? Does gold have to go into your gas tank and let you drive your car? Gold can be gold. But anybody who would trade liberty for security deserves neither and will lose both. Never, ever trade liberty for security. You have to have liberty, and we can't trust people to give it to you. It either comes from God or from algorithms. Those are our two options, okay? And God hasn't been giving us very much lately, so the algorithms are going to have to make up the difference. So I'm in the game, and I want to win. I want the forces of decentralization and censorship resistance and freedom of association and commerce expression to win. And there's collections of blockchain technologies that will make that happen. And there's collections of technologies that won't. And there's no guarantee it's going to go one way or the other. It is everything to do with how people buy things, where they store them, and ultimately the decisions they make and the agency that they take. Everything in the modern world is designed to rob you of agency. The news robs you of critical thinking and an opinion. Banks rob you of self-custody. The central banks rob your money of its value. It says $1, but they kill the dollar's value by debasing it. All these things are pale simulacra of their true intended purpose. And so you got to be skeptical, and you got to take a step back and put your time and faith in systems that by their design can't fail, by their design have integrity, and then build back up society from that. If we're unwilling to do that and we trade convenience for it, well, then we'll lose, and we'll end up creating a dystopian panopticon hellscape that makes Klaus Schwab like hard every day, but I don't want to live in that world, David. I want to live in a world where we have freedom and liberty and basic human rights. So by 2035, we'll know, and it'll come down to what's in the legislation. It'll come down to what technologies win, and it'll come down to what systems dominate. And I can't tell you All I can tell you is that I'm in the race and along with a few other good people, and we're all fighting hard against people who are also in the race, who are not good people.
Charles Hoskinson explained that networks handling Bitcoin's transactions will thrive by attracting lots of funds locked, TVL, and high transaction volume. He compared Bitcoin's movement across various blockchains to tourism. Bitcoin users spend their tokens like tourists paying in US dollars abroad, benefiting local blockchain economies such as those using Cardano or Near tokens. After earning yield on these other chains, users return to Bitcoin's base network. Additionally, Bitcoin's eventual goal is to surpass gold's $10 trillion market by becoming a leading store of value, supported by clear regulations allowing financial products and investments similar to gold-backed assets. He stressed that Bitcoin won't handle all blockchain uses. For example, decentralized social networks, medical records, or complex smart contracts will live on other, more programmable chains. He described a future with many blockchains each serving different purposes, creating an internet of blockchains. Charles added that blockchain rivalry and maximalism can be divisive, but growing user adoption and network decentralization bring progress. He argued that Bitcoin won't evolve into a super programmable network, and that's fine. It aims to be digital gold. He emphasized a fight for decentralization, freedom, and integrity, warning that sacrificing liberty for security risks losing both. He believes the coming decade will determine which blockchain technologies and rules dominate and shape the future of digital freedom. What do you think will drive Bitcoin's growth the most in the next 5 years? DeFi, institutional adoption, or new regulations? Please drop your thoughts in the comments below, share this video, and hit your thumbs on the like button. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.